Okay, going live. All right, so we are live. Good evening once again, everybody. This is Legacy Talk. We are back again tonight to talk about growing up without a father. Tonight we have Shona Rawlinson and also Coach Anthony Johnson, and of course my main man Mark Garrett. This is a topic that is very sensitive, and there are many people out there, children, adults, that actually grew up without a father or a father figure in their lives. And for those people, they have stories that they have to share, how that affected their lives, even growing up and their adult life, how much impact it's had on them in their relationships and bonding with people, getting close to people. And so tonight we're going to be talking to Shauna uh, and Anthony to hear their stories, what they had to go through, the pain, the struggles, the rejections, the stigma that comes with it. Not having a father figure. Sometimes it's not the father who chooses not to be there. It's just because a mother just does not want the father in the life of a child. And these children grow up. I have seen many children growing up looking for their fathers, and they put in all the effort just to be able to connect with their biological fathers. And I believe everybody's entitled to a father. That's why God had a father in the picture. I don't think that without a father in the picture, we'll even have any children. But God has His original design to make sure that a father is needed to give the seed for us to be able to have children. And so without a father, I mean, there are so many uh, issues that comes with that. So I'm gonna pass it on to Mark. Mark, any comments before we start? Um, you know,
Yes, that you're so right that I mean the father and the importance of the father. I mean, God intended there to be fathers, intended there to be mothers, but there's something that a father gives to their children that a mother just can't, and that's okay. A father helps his son to be confident and to know he has what it takes. That's what a boy wants to know from his father. I'm good enough, I have what it takes, that whole thing. And for a daughter, she needs to know that she's beautiful and she's loved and she's cherished. And so a father gives that to their children. And without a father in the picture, then it makes it that much more difficult for children to receive that.
mm, mm. So Anthony, I'm gonna ask you a question first. How does it feel, or how did it feel growing up without a father?
Man, that's a loaded question, right? Like
Yeah.
it, the first word that came to my mind when you said that was it felt lonely, right?
Mm,
Like even if you have family and you have your mother, you have siblings, as a boy, as a young man, you long for your father, and
mm,
it does something to you when he's not around because you don't know the story. Right? When you're a kid, you just know my father's not there, and you feel like it makes you feel like potentially that something's wrong with you. Like, why doesn't he want me? Right. So there's so many feelings that come with that. Right. So, like, and those are the first two that really come to my mind, like loneliness and just the feeling of being unwanted. Right. And so
mm,
it's tough it's tough for young men.
mm. Shona, same question to you. How did it feel growing up, and
The
how do you
first word
feel
that
now
came,
in your adult? Yeah.
well, the first word that came to my mind as well was lonely.
Mm.
And then I think the second one would be a feeling of security. you know, the instability of just having one parent to rely on, you know. I think that it stems from also not knowing where you come from. You're half of this other person, you know, and not knowing who you are, or certain quirks. Like, I'm a quirky child, and I've got this mechanic gene in me. I love to fix things, and the way my brain processes is very much like my father, and that would have been key to me growing up with my own growth, to just have someone that I could identify with.
Mm, wow. And Anthony, do you feel like a part of your identity was missing growing up?
Well, I don't know if I could articulate it that way as a child, right? Like feeling like my identity was missing. I definitely felt that way as I got into adulthood, and feeling like there's something about my history that I don't know. There's a story that I need to understand that I'm missing. And as I get older, and I'm like, okay, realizing I'm getting smarter, I'm having life experience. I'm like, man, my father has a story, and I want to hear it. Like, it went from like anger, resentment, to trying to evolve as a person, and turned into curiosity. So I feel like, all right, something is definitely missing. And the more I learned, when I started to learn about my father, then I felt like I was learning more about myself. Like, his story is a part of my story. So yeah, absolutely.
Mark, any question?
So how for both of you, how long did it take, or did you ever get to meet your father?
For me, my parents divorced when I was 2, but he was in and out. They would try to rekindle things and things of that nature. And but it wasn't until I was 25 I was diagnosed with glaucoma, which is something, usually you're 75 when you get diagnosed with that sort of ailment, and it came directly from him. And so I, out of medical necessity, I sort of needed to reach out to him to understand what was going on. And in that process, I got to know the man.
So 25 years. And
25 years old. Yeah.
And never spoke to him once?
No, I spoke to him off and on throughout the years. Every 3-4 years he'd pop in and try to make a presence. But by then he was so estranged from the family and had so many mental health and substance abuse issues of his own that it never stuck, And of course, there was still a combative parent involved that, and we had our own feelings too. The tension was there. It would take a while for it to slip away before, that wall comes down and you could just be in his presence, but looking back as an adult now, I think, because I did see a lot of unfortunate things transpire between my parents. Those aren't really the memories I have. When I look back, I remember, the ones that stick out the most are like when I was 5 years old and wanted my training wheels off my bike, and my dad handed me a wrench and just helped with the heavy lifting, honestly, amongst all the madness, that's what I remember was the time spent in those intimate moments that no one can destroy or manipulate, those in between times,
I've heard that too, just it's the quality of the time. It's those little moments. It's, that wrench that was handed to you. It was something between your dad and you, like you're fixing things, you're doing something, right? And I think those are the things that, when we talk about all the things that a dad does, just even those little things, like, we take them for granted sometimes. I think even as fathers, like, hey, if we're just hanging out doing something, it doesn't have to be anything super impressive. It's just hanging out. It's just.
Well, my mom wasn't going to let me play with tools and make a mess in the garage. She didn't understand that, and she certainly didn't want her darling little girl playing like a boy or doing those sorts of things. And she just didn't understand. That's how my brain operated, and I hungered for that sort of thing.
Yeah. And it's different with me. Like my similar to Shonda, like my dad was kind of in and out. And sometimes I feel like it's almost worse when he's in and out. right? Instead of just being completely absent. They're like, yeah, oh, I never met him, I never seen him. You still long for it, but if you get a taste of it, you're like, oh man, it's kind of cool to hang out with my dad, and then he's just like gone, all right, and then a few years later pops back in. He's like, oh man, maybe he's back, maybe he's here for good now. Boom, he's gone again, and it's like it develops. It developed for me at least. I got like this hard shell of like never wanting to get excited for things because I didn't want to be let down. So like I knew who the man was, but I didn't really know him. We didn't have a really good relationship, and we tried to develop one, but it didn't work out. He was never consistent. And I remember in the 8th grade, I called my father. That was the time where it went for a long period of time before we closed again. I had to call and tell him he wasn't invited to my 8th grade graduation because I only had a limited number of tickets, right, for seats or whatever. And I don't know. I wanted to call him and let him know that you weren't invited because the tickets are reserved for people who I think care about. And for a long time after that, we didn't speak. I didn't see him again for a while. We're okay now. We don't have a great relationship, but we're okay. Like if I feel like I want to reach out to him, I'll reach out to him and say hello. I just got married on the 16th. He was at my wedding. He showed up, and so that was cool. It was just nice to see him there. But through childhood, we didn't have a relationship.
Right. For me, when I got married, I invited my dad, but my brother gave me away. I wasn't going to give my dad that honor. I was still that bitter.
Wow. So in both of your cases, was it your dad that chose not to be in your lives, or the system just did not allow him to be there for you? Anthony?
So what I learned, all right, so I created a podcast not too long ago called The Molds That Make Fatherhood, and my father was actually my first guest on my podcast. We had a really great conversation. And when I learned my father's story, I learned that it wasn't as simple as that. I learned that it wasn't as simple as like, it's the system, it's him not necessarily not wanting to be around, but not knowing how to integrate himself into my life because there was so much shame involved with the father that he knew he was, right? So, and like somebody mentioned earlier, right? Like it's just like we don't have to do anything special. We could just spend time together, and that's enough. I remember calling my father when I was in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. I was in the Army. I was doing search and rescue and security, and I called him and had a conversation with him because I just couldn't take it anymore, and he needed to know how I felt. And then I found out that that was the first time I actually listened to my father and his side of the story. And he was able to tell me, he's like, his father was really abusive. My father dropped out of high school, never graduated high school. He was a drug dealer, drug addict, right? And I was like, man, it would have been fine just to hang out with you. And he's like, man, sometimes I didn't want to come get you because we couldn't do anything. I didn't have any money. I didn't have any, so I was ashamed to come pick you up and just like hang out at my house. Like, what am I gonna do? Like, so, there was a lot of factors that were involved with it, and I think a lot of it had to do with shame.
I think
Shana, what about you? Go ahead, Max.
For us, it was more, my father would get incarcerated too. Substance abuse became a problem. And he would get incarcerated, and he would get out and do like a treatment program and get things going well for him. And the minute he'd get a job, child support would come along and take most of his money. And, they get pigeonholed into a corner where they really, no matter how hard they fight, they can't get out of it. No matter how high they jump, how hard they work, 80, 90 hours a week, they still can't afford to survive. And it beats them back down and puts them right back into a substance abuse issue again. So it's a revolving door.
And that's what I was going to mention, is that's kind of what I see happen many times. I've got a lot of friends that, are kind of in this, men that are in the start of this process, and they have no idea what they're in store for. And they're good fathers. They're fathers that absolutely want to be there. In some cases better than the moms, but they have no idea what they might be up for. And right. I try to, just have them go in eyes wide open and go, okay, look, I've had some experience with this, so here's what you can expect, and here's how to navigate, and here's how to just get out without the least amount of scars, basically.
Right. I find myself educating as well. I go on and I look, and you see sort of the same thing happening. She wants this percentage of this and this percentage, and I have to leave the home. And the father feels obligated to do so. That's the right thing. Just take the problem and go kind of attitude, and work my way back from there. And once they do that, they don't realize they've already been strategized against. Yeah. And you have nothing but an uphill battle fight against you.
Yeah. And here's the other thing, let's say, because everyone has a past, right? So let's say that father wasn't perfect in the past, might have some blemish on the record. They bring it up, and kind of to your point, like you mentioned, I mean, a little bit of encouragement and a light at the end of the tunnel can go a long way where these fathers don't give up. Because, I mean, you can have the most successful guy in the world, and he gets ran through the gauntlet, and he's just like, I can't do it anymore. And then, if you have anything that might be, you had a past, you did something, maybe you're in jail in the past or something like that. So they bring that up, like,
you're done.
A convicted killer. And it's like, no, this was what it was. And they don't allow that good meaning father to really make it through the system and be there for their kids. So unfortunately, if they don't have enough support or encouragement or resolve or faith or whatever it might be, they do give up. And then the child suffers. And then we have all the society ills and all the issues that we have nowadays.
No, just to pick on what you said. Oh, go ahead, Mark. Sorry, Anthony. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just gonna say, like, my father's been in jail too. Like, a lot of these fathers been in jail, but not rehabilitated. And that's also a generation who didn't necessarily believe in therapy and things like that, even after they got out of the system. So you're getting out of the system, you don't know how to manage and cope with the trauma that you've been through in your life. And you are afraid. You want to be a father, but maybe you're afraid of. My father has 9 kids, so I know he's reached out to certain kids, and they're still angry and bitter, and they're like, I don't want to talk to you. So they don't even feel like they're wanted by their children, so they're afraid too.
Yeah. And Mark, just to pick on something you mentioned earlier on about none of us are perfect. You are very right. We're all doing our best, right? We're not perfect in any way, but out of our imperfection, we always strive to do what is right, to live that life that brings us to that place where we can honor people and be there for people in times of their challenges. I have a question on YouTube. I have questions flowing in right now. But the question, I'm just trying to show it on the screen as well. Okay, so there you go. How do you believe growing up? This from one of our viewers on YouTube. How do you believe growing up without a father has impacted you as an adult? Is it impacted your life choices or your relationships or other things?
Definitely, yeah. Always, there will always be relationship issues, and it starts with trust. Got me. That's a hard one to answer, because you really have to get really introspective. So that's a hard one to answer, and it's such a loaded question. But yeah, as an adult, and I mean, you're playing catch up with the rest of the world as far as your cognitive behavior. You're behind. We're stunted.
Yeah, and it can affect your relationships because you're not seeing a healthy relationship where one looks like you're so guarded, and like she mentioned, that lack of trust. You don't trust people. You don't want to let people get close to you. And, so you end up pushing people away, and because you don't want to experience that type of heartbreak and that type of pain. And then when I feel like when I had kids, there was maybe some type of overcompensation for, like, I didn't have my father, so I just wanted to make sure I was the best father I could be. And I think it helped me in a lot of ways, but it also, in some ways maybe overcompensated.
Hmm.
And it's just it has, and sometimes you don't even really know the impact it has on you. You're just like you're just going through life and trying to figure it out. Like
Right.
it's like trial by error. You know, um, go as you go, you're learning as you go. Like you're like, am I doing this right? Maybe constantly questioning yourself. Like, am I doing this fatherhood thing right? Like, I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing. Um, and then you feel like you get extra resentment. And you're like, if you were around, like I wouldn't have to figure this out. But yeah,
Yeah.
in so many ways.
I know a good friend
Yeah.
of mine. He lost his dad when he was 13, I think, and his dad actually took his own life. And so he struggled with, because again, boys, they want to know that they're good enough, they have what it takes and stuff. And so because he didn't have that father figure in those pretty much, growing into manhood years, right? So he struggled with that. And so he went from, trying to be super successful, right, to prove he had what it takes, to then basically then having a life of, alcohol and things like that. So he went to vices like that. And so he bounced back and forth, trying to just kind of figure out what it was that he was missing, what it was. And ultimately he found it in his heavenly father, right? So in God, he found that because he didn't have his father growing up, he had to look to his heavenly father to really give him those pieces that he was missing so he could become whole again. But I know he struggled with all sorts of different ways to deal with it for years.
Yeah.
I had a conversation with a woman, and she was sharing, some of the experiences she had growing up as a young girl, um, and how that affected her, um, and ultimately how she viewed marriage. Um, her dad was never there. It wasn't that the dad chose not to be there, but it was just that he was not allowed to be there. And for some time, the dad just disappeared because I believe going through this, Mark, you and I will, share the same um, story, that it is a very emotional struggle. And so this young woman grew up not having any father figure in her life. And when it got to a point where men were actually coming to ask her hand in a marriage, she was terrified. She was very terrified because, like you both said, she did not have trust anymore. She lost trust. She felt that the dad basically decided not to be in her life. And so she had difficulty adjusting to life, even to a point where when we were coming around to marry her, she could not commit herself because one, there was fear, and two, she felt that same thing can happen to her children, right? And so for a while, she struggled, she struggled until eventually she had some help with counseling, for her to be able to, settle down. But this is happening to a lot of, like a lot of families, and it is not right. I mean, this topic is so emotional. I'm just sitting here, all emotional, hearing your stories, and it's hard. It's hard, to hear you both just pour out. I have a question on Facebook, from one of our viewers on Facebook, and it reads, "Good job. What's your thoughts on getting these videos in schools, educational or sending invitations? Do social workers and anyone working with children would stop the claim uh, of they didn't know?" So basically, I think you know, the question is, why are we not sharing these videos with schools? Why are the schools not engaging? Because yeah, there was a story I was reading about this young woman whose father was never there, and she would go to school, when they have special events, her friends' fathers are there, and she was always singled out. She did not have any father around, and she grew up with that pain. She grew up with that pain. And Sean, I'm not sure if you ever even experienced that growing up.
Oh, definitely, definitely. As far as like the school system and all that stuff goes, though, you know, there could be better ways. Like most fathers don't even know that they can log on to their child's school district and access certain things. Like they have to be taught these things because they weren't the primary caretaker in the home, you know. And so they think that certain things are inaccessible to them. You know, they rely on mothers for school portraits and things like that. When you know they can access the photographer themselves, but they're little simple things like that they continually get cut out of, that really just come down to no one knows better, really, you know. And yeah, I think the schools could do a better job of this. I think it's definitely not a topic for children. This is something that all us adults should be dealing with behind the scenes. But I think you know what it really comes down to is people understanding childhood trauma. And I think at this point, the point we've gotten to with the high rates of divorce and everything, if we're going to allow people to get a divorce, then before that divorce is finalized, maybe they should do a 6-week, you know, child psychology trauma course like they do for foster parents. Foster parents have to do a 6-week course to be, you know, licensed in the state of California. So I think if two people are going to decide to separate, then they need to be educated on what that separation is going to do to their children, because even without a combative parent or someone talking ill of you or creating a harmful situation for you, alienation happens just from the absence of the parent no longer being in the home. Just, you know, the time spent is where it's at. And if that's not happening, then the distance grows, and you don't need another party. So I know mothers that try to cultivate a relationship with their kids, and sometimes there's just tension, and that distance already being there, it gets awkward. And it's hard to come back from that.
Well, and as you probably know, you know, we've been trying to push for 50-50, you know, shared parenting, and there's always the, you know,
I think that's a necessity.
All the forces against it, you know, except for we have a few states now, and we keep moving and trying to push that way. You know, here's the thing: it's so simple, except for in the case of some very, you know, like, you know. Cases that are very small in percentage, that it's not best for the kids to have 50-50. It's best to have 50-50. And it's very simple, because 50-50, here it is, here's the difference, whatever child support. And, you know, they'll always claim, right, the judges and the courts, well, they can't co-parent well, so that's hard to do. Well, this is how you solve that. It's 50-50. And as soon as you're not co-parenting, you bring them in, you find out who's not co-parenting well, and you then give the extra time to the one that's co-parenting well, right? I mean, people are going to basically co-parent very easy, right? If there's, you know, they're going to lose access to their kids because they're the ones that's proven not to co-parent well. You can see pretty clearly who's not co-parenting. And if that was the case, if you just kept it there, the alienation would stop. You know, you would have fathers and mothers in their kids' lives. You would have, your kids would be well adjusted. But of course, as we know, I mean, there's all these things that in the current system work against that. The other thing you mentioned that was very interesting too is on the school aspect. So I think what happens is when you're married as fathers is we're not very involved, because we just assume that the mother's going to do it and that's the role or whatever. So, you know, in a marriage, you know, you're going to get the communication back, you know, oh, I went to school and I, you know, went to class and little Johnny's doing this or that or whatever. Okay. You know, but that's still not an excuse. Fathers should be involved, right? When you become a single father, then you realize, because you're like, okay, it's on me now to get the communication. And so you want to get involved, but you're automatically put in a spot now to where they're going to look at mom first on everything. Well, here, mom. Oh, mom got the email. Like, I don't know how many times I've had to insert, no, I want to get emailed on everything. I'm going to be there on every event. You know, I want all the documentation to have my signature. And, you know, I mean, because now what I should have been doing even in the marriage is now I'm realizing how important it is. So, right. I mean, that's just for men that are married. Hey, take a critical influence in your kids' lives while you're married, because you're gonna, if it ever happens that you're a single father, you're gonna be fighting for it because it's not automatic. So I think schools also need to be, just as you mentioned on this, with all the things that, like, how videos, or how can we educate more, like schools need to understand, and they're getting better and better, I guess, because unfortunately we have so many separated, divorced parents in schools. They're getting better of realizing that they better involve both parents an equal amount of time, but historically they haven't done a good job of that.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That is very true. And I like the fact that, Mark, you had to put yourself in the picture. Sometimes uh, I believe that sometimes the school wants to see the other parent, but until we show up there, to demand that we want to be involved and be, and be able to receive any form of communication, from the school will not do it. And so, to some of the dads out there, that are giving up, you know, don't give up. Don't give up,
Mhm.
because the children need you as much as they need their mother. Believe me. It gets hard, it gets difficult, but don't give up. If you know you have to be in a school events. Believe me, the children appreciate it so much, just to see you there, watching them perform at the school function. They take pride in that. And so just my words, some words of encouragement to some of the dads out there that are giving up. Anthony, I know your time is short, but I have a question, for you.
Mhm.
Um, how does it affect a child, and based on your own personal experience, when you don't have a father?
I think. Well, there's one thing. I'll say a couple more things before I hop off here. And thank you so much for having me on, man. I love what you're doing, man. I love what you guys are doing, and it's just amazing. I'll say something about the education thing, and then I'll
Mhm.
comment on the.
Yeah.
Go on. So I think one thing we gotta think about when it comes to education is, I think it's school's responsibility to bring. There's people like all of us here that are willing to fight this fight. There's coaches. There's resilience trainers. There's all these things. You got use that some of that money to bring people into the schools. I have a friend that does uh, has a government contract, and she goes into schools and does leadership training. Right? Teachers, school counselors are overwhelmed right now. They have a lot on their plate. Right? Anxiety and depression is at an all-time high amongst adolescents. Right? So they are overwhelmed in the school system. Use some of those resources that you get and bring people in to do some leadership training. Then you can help the kids out in a better way. There are people who want to do this stuff. So you have to be creative and find other resources, and not just keep it on, put it on all the faculty and school staff. They got a lot on their plate right now. Um, as far as like how does it affect the child when not having a father, I think just by nature, like dads, they provide that. Dads are like those. They're the teachers, right? Like they provide that structure. You know, a dad would be the first one to say, "Hey, I'm not here to be your friend, right? Like I'm here to be your dad. Like I'm here to guide you through life. I'm here to teach you some things. I'm here to make sure you're not going out and messing up in the world. That's my job, right? I see it when, and by nature, moms are more than nurturers. That's just how it normally is, right? And I see it even I co-parent, so I see it with my kids. I have a 10-year-old son, and my daughter's 9, and I see it with my son, especially when he's just a little more wild, when he's with his mom, and like, he may push the boundaries a little bit more, and like you got dad there like to rein you in, right? And it's like, um, you feel like you're missing something when you don't have that father figure. It's like there's a sense of stability missing. And my grandfather was around, so I had, and just the little bit of presence that he had in my life was super impactful.
Mm.
Right, like just the presence of a man, right? Like, and And the little things that he did was super impactful in my life. My grandfather was like a gentle giant. Like he didn't speak a lot, right? But when he did speak, you listened. And when he did speak, you knew it was something that mattered. Right? Like he didn't speak a lot. So it's like my grandfather was speaking, you listened. And I remember everything my grandfather said because I knew when he spoke it was something that mattered. Right? That's a lot of the things that dads bring to the table. And those little things that you don't even recognize. And like I do, like we talked about before, there's so many other psychological things, like we talked about prison and we talked about all these things that happen when dads aren't around. It's just, man, it hurts.
Shauna?
I think it's you don't have a foundation to work from. You don't have a strong foundation to work from, and then you see it in the data. We're 5 times more likely to commit suicide, 32 times more likely to run away. The statistics are staggering as to the effects that it has on your children when you don't have a 2-parent household or 2 parents involved. It's sad.
It is very sad. Very sad, Mark.
Yeah, I actually got to get to some fatherhood duties right now. That's why I thought early, but thank you so much for having me on. And I don't know if you're paying attention to, I don't know what state you guys are in, but West Virginia, you may know West Virginia passed the 50-50 earlier this year, and so
Nice.
it's going to be. I think it's going to start trickling into other states. People are paying attention. And they're probably going to follow West Virginia's model of what they did. Chet Pinkerton and those guys. But yeah, you all have a great evening. Thanks for having me on, and I hope to connect again soon.
For sure. Thanks, Anthony.
Thanks, Anthony.
God bless.
Yeah, so I mean, you mentioned about West Virginia, and I think there's 1 or 2 other states. I'm in Texas. We had a good opportunity to try, a year and a half ago, and had 200 people down there to speak, and those were fathers, and there was women as well, and there was children speaking on the importance of a 50-50 arrangement. And unfortunately, they didn't even pass it out of community. Out of the committee there, basically. So, we'll be back next time and we'll have twice as many and we'll just keep at it. I do hope, like he said, that we will just kind of continue to steamroll down that path of, we've got a few here, got a few states, we're going to get a few more. At some point, you would think that, they've got to basically reckon with the movement, because it's all over. I mean, you can't sit there and blame all the ills of society and not see what the statistics say, just as you were mentioning. They don't have fathers in their life. And, for those kids that don't have fathers, a good role model father figure is necessary, but it's still not the biological father either. So, there's just something about the biological father, just like biological mother. There's purposes for each, but there's just some things that a father can give to their children and a mother can.
Right. I had a beautiful relationship with my stepfather. You know, so I did have another father in the home, but it's you like I said, he can't teach me about my roots. Mm-hmm. He can't tell me why I'm quirky and like to fix things. There are things that you can only get from your DNA.
Yeah. That is very true. That is very, very true. My follow-up question, to you, Shauna, I believe we've all read your posts, and I think that's what pushed me, to connect with you. I want to talk about your post. What drove you? I saw those signs. I saw those signs on the trees. I'm like, this is wonderful. I wish we can do this all across the country.
Right.
You can print some out of your own and hit the neighborhoods. Do it. That was the point. That's why I shared it. The reason I did what I did was because I felt powerless. we'd lost and continue to lose. And it gets to a hopeless situation where you don't see a way out. You don't see where you're ever going to find your way in. And I just had that. I'm just cut that way. I have to do something constructive. I just can't sit on my butt and whine about it. I had to get up and do something. And so I took an in-your-face approach. And while it was funny because it was motivated by my current situation. But while I was out there posting those, I could only think of my dad. You know, and that's why I was saying those memories, those bittersweet memories. I want all dads out there to know that those moments that you do have, the quiet moments when you're sitting playing video games and, you know, or taking your training wheels off, those are the ones we remember.
Mark?
Yeah, I mean that post, you know, I posted it in my group and it got shared, I don't know, like over 16,000 times. I mean, it was crazy how many, the reach, you know.
That's sad. It's sad to me. It's so sad to me that there's so many, that so many people felt the need that they had to share that they had to get that out. It's sad. It's bittersweet for me because in one respect we're getting awareness. That was the point as well. And that's why I was very specific in my wording. I have a tiny bit of a writing background. And so my goal was to catch your attention. And my goal was to use, especially in that intro, that beginning paragraph, I was methodical about the wording and the quoting there. Because, you know, moms mean well. Honestly, I know my mom when she behaved the way she did, she was trying to protect me the only way she knew how. And she was acting out of fear and her own pain. And she couldn't see through her own pain to do the right thing for her children. It made me kind of lose track of my thought there. But
and let's speak about that for a second. So what do you think that is? Like they can't get a hold of their own pain, and so like because that's what's happening. And like I said, a lot of these fathers,
they only see it from their perception. They only see it for their perception. And you know, this individual caused me pain and keep them away.
It's almost like it overcomes them. And so like a lot of these fathers that they're like, okay, well, we divorced, but you know what? I think, you know, she loved me once, so she'll never do this. And all of a sudden they're like, I don't know who that person is.
Right.
And it's a control, it's a manipulation, it's, you know, and they're just like, I mean, the fathers all of a sudden then, I mean, honestly, like I know some people will say, oh yeah, really? No, it's like they're throwing a dose of PTSD, like boom, like it's coming on them and they're like, I don't even know how to handle this. Like I am so, like I've got this anxiety, I've got this, like, I don't know. I mean, a friend of mine that just got thrown into this, he had to go down to the hospital this weekend because of the stress and everything that was happening. And this guy is like a fit guy, like he teaches martial arts, and literally like with everything going on, and even myself and some others guiding him through the process, still he's like, I can't even think now. I don't even know what to do. Like I thought this was just going to be simple and straightforward, and now all of a sudden, like he's concerned about how his daughter's going to be used in the process.
Right. Yeah, these things, they morph, they grow, and I don't think that mothers are, you know, it, like I said, it grows. It starts off, they're trying to be protective, but they're coming from a place of fear. And so it's just a really sad dilemma. It really all comes down to a corrupt system that preys on people with mental health issues. And this is very much a generational disease that we all are continuing on with. You know, we talk about the numbers. I mean, back when I was growing up, I was born in the 70s. I grew up in the 80s and 90s. And, you know, back then, maybe my family situation was a little on the extreme side, but I guarantee you, looking at these numbers these days, it's becoming the norm. This is not Gen Z. This is Gen fatherless.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Shauna, I'm just pulling some things out of your post. You wrote, I didn't know when I told him I did not want to go that I was ripping his heart from his chest and sealing his fate. choosing not to go with them, were you being coached, or it was just a choice?
Um, I wouldn't say she was coaching. Like I said, I think she was protecting. She was warning me that, and so yeah, she put off her own fears on me. Um, but it's funny. My father came from a broken home too. Like I said, this is a generational thing, and my mom would share things she certainly shouldn't have shared with small children. We heard the horrific stories. But she would follow it up with teaching us a little empathy as well by mentioning, that what he had grown up in and that he didn't know better. But because he didn't know better, she didn't have faith that he could change. And I think our court systems had something in place to help these families, to help them see light at the end of the tunnel and find their way back to at least doing the right thing for their children. But that's not what's in place. If anything, it's the antithesis of that.
Yeah.
Mark?
Oh, I agree. I mean, the courts do not basically, like I said, they work for a collaborative divorce. They want the divorce to go on as long as possible. They do not work to diffuse the situation. Very few. I'm not saying that there aren't some good attorneys out there and,
right.
Some good mediators and stuff. I've had all over the gamut of them. And boy, when you get a good mediator, a good ad litem, that, like, where have you been? And
they were probably a child like myself. They've been through it, and that's why they feel impassioned to get out there and do something.
They have to be affected somehow, because without being affected or just having that good nature, they're not incented to do that. But when they do, it makes a world of difference. And if they could see how positively they've affected children, it would just be good for them to see how they've done that. Because it's gonna, generation after generation, impact kids, and the reverse for those that haven't.
Right.
See, this is why we need a 50-50 in place. And Shona, you're sharing about your dads and the generational burden that is in the family. I believe that some of this generational crisis that many of us are going through can be stopped if we have a 50-50 shared parenting in place. In the absence of abuse, I strongly believe that 50-50 shared parenting is the best thing to do. It's in the best interest of children, and it works best for both of the parents. I've heard a lot of stories that because both of the parents cannot co-parent or they cannot agree on things, then that becomes a basis for not allowing the 50-50 in place. But that is not true. It is not true. I think that one of the parents intentionally chooses to create that environment of things not working, or not being able to agree on anything, just because of sometimes the benefit that is in, right? But I strongly believe that if we have the shared parenting laws in place, and I follow much of what's happening in the US, and it's just amazing that a lot of states are beginning to pass these laws. In Canada, we are yet to see that. Right, we are yet to see that in Canada, and there are so many people, millions of men out there that are just desiring to have this, just desiring to be in the life of their children. Shona, with you pouring out, and a lot of men have read, you posted these on the men's platforms, and I believe on the women's platform as well.
Yes.
And you being a female, you are speaking up for the men. Why do you think the men are not rising up to speak for themselves?
Because they're already defeated. And I think it's funny, like when I was out putting up my flyers, I said all I could think about was my dad. I was doing it for a current situation, but it really brought me back. And I think that's what prompted me to post my post and share with others what I was doing, was because I felt I had to pay some sort of homage to him, and sort of, a tribute of a daughter's love, I had to share that regardless of what the situation was between two people, and in my situation, it was the father. Nowadays, we are seeing the script flip a little, and it's unfortunate that mothers are experiencing this too. No parent should be alienated, and gender should never be an issue.
Mark?
You said so men they do feel defeated definitely in this, but there are also a lot of men that, I mean, champion the charge and just keep it at it. But it does, like you said, I mean, it just, after a while, you're like, does anyone care? And so as we get these communities and we get more and more, just support and like in my group, I mean, just to see how many people have joined, and man, I'm glad this group's here, and the support, encouragement, and just trying to walk people through, okay, here's where you're at right now, here's how you get through it, and we'll be here for you, that kind of thing.
Well, that's it right there. That's the best healing process that we can all do for one another, is commune, get together, share ideas, and help one another along. And even if we can't see light at the tunnel in our own situations, if we can help someone else, that's empowering. And it does. It makes you feel good. It gives you at least some sort of enrichment, some sort of purpose and direction with your life now that no longer have your children to share that with.
Yeah. But let me tell you what's even more empowering, and this is what I was going to get to, is that when women like yourself are then fighting on behalf of us men, man, that just means so much. Because I mean, like, I have another friend, and it's like, as they realize what is happening to fathers and they start to get on board as a female and say, I want to make a difference, I want to be involved, I want to talk about this stuff. I mean, that's why, like, when men get married again and now their new wife is like, they're their biggest supporter, because they see what's going on. Like, when people get educated and they realize, and then we have women that champion the cause with us, because they've been either touched by it, or they've been a child without a father, or whatever it is. Man, I mean, it's huge. It is huge, because we feel like, man, we're just constantly being defeated by the court, but also defeated by every woman out there. Like, and
don't feel that way. Don't feel that way. I think it really, like I said, it just comes down to perspective. And if you've never experienced it, how do you know? Yeah. And you don't think that this is going to transpire between two people. Like, why would a parent do that?
Exactly.
And I think for me, what it really comes down to, who I'm truly fighting for, is the children. My heart goes out to the fathers. Right. It truly does. I have nothing but compassion for any alienated parent, and I can't imagine. I have to see it secondhand, and looking back, I think about the painful look on my father's face. And as a kid, you don't even think for a minute. It doesn't really register with you what you're doing. You wouldn't want to hurt your father. We're supposed to have unconditional love for our parents. Yeah. And I think that's where we're really going wrong, because now we're telling kids that one parent we're just going to make them go away. They don't matter anymore. And that is detrimental to someone's psychological well-being. If your father isn't important, then who is? And if you believe your father can throw you away, then anyone can. So of course you're going to have interpersonal relationship problems. Of course you're going to have trust issues. If daddy left me, any Joe Schmo will, Yeah. And those are the empty feelings and the questions that kids.
And what does it say to a child, whether it's a father or a mother, hey, they're not as important, there's something wrong with them, this, that, or whatever, and that whole alienation thing that happens. And they start to go, okay, well, if mom or dad, there's something wrong with them, then there's something wrong with me, and they start to, I mean, it's just, I mean, just the.
Well, for me, if there's something wrong here, then don't we teach our children to love? And if there's something wrong, shouldn't we be giving dad more compassion? Shouldn't we just be flooding him with more love to get him back to where he should be? Should we just let, this is the funny part to me, is, they will have children with them, and they will have, continue to have, 2, 3 children down the line, and then all of a sudden this person's unfit to be around children. That's just the part they forget. They get so blinded by their pain that they forget that this other person is human. And not only is this other person human, but that person is the other half of your children. It's mind-boggling, honestly, from my perception, that why any parent would think that this would be helpful to their children is beyond me.
I think that's what we just said, is they're not thinking. They're really not. They're not thinking. They're not thinking about the child. They're thinking about, it's a very selfish perspective, and you can't explain it. And in the courts and attorneys and such, they just,
well, the courts train them. The
Love
courts train the petitioner. They create that, and when you start levying one person's finances toward the other person, well, now you've reassigned the power dynamic, haven't you? Now you've really given some. Who would hand their ATM card over to their ex and think that it's not going to have devastating consequences? These things are all very simple in my mind to me. I mean, it's just, well, if you do this, this will be the end result, and if we were smarter, we'd pay attention to our history, wouldn't we? We'd learn from our mistakes instead of just, throwing people away, throwing problems away, acting like it isn't happening. And then, we live in the culture we live in now, and we all wonder what's wrong. Well, I tell you what's wrong. Half of us don't have dads.
One last question, Shauna, and we'll bring it to an end. Just a Facebook user just posted something that I just have it on the screen. If your father isn't important, who is?
Right.
Can you shed some light on it? Can you go,
like I said,
deeper into
people become expendable then, don't they? If you can throw your own dad away, you can throw just about anyone away, can't you?
Yeah.
And I can tell you just from I hung out in high school with the other single mom kids, and we had attitudes. We had tough shells, and we listened to hard rock music, and we let our aggression be known. And that's not good for anybody. We need to reel it in. We really do. We need to take a step back and think about the love you had for your child the minute it was born, and focus on that instead of your own pain.
I wish we can have more women like you, Shauna, sharing their stories, because honestly, stories like this go a long way, especially when it's coming from, the women. It goes a long way. I was sharing with Mark about 2 weeks ago, a woman that was watching one of our shows who quickly turned things around, for her children. A mother who was essentially who had full custody of her children. And after watching that show with Reverend Susan and Donna Rice, she quickly had to reach out to her ex-husband to basically put in place, a shared parenting plan just for the child. And she reached out to me, and I was just frozen, because I'm like, wow, if we can have a lot of mothers come to this realization that it is not about the parents, it's about the children, their emotional struggles, their psychology. It's all about their mental state, right? And when we are putting children through these things, we have to pull back and think, how are we affecting their mental state? Are we building them up for the future, or we are setting them up to fail? And I think that's what a lot of these parents need to ask themselves. Am I helping my child by, keeping the other parent away? Right? And for this woman that did this, every now and then I think about that story, and I just pray that we can have a lot of people. If the government doesn't want to act, it's a moral responsibility to do it. And if a lot of parents can just start doing that, sometimes the government, it takes time. It takes a lot of lobbying. We can do this. I believe we can do this. If we can all come to that place of waking up, that it's not about us, it's about the children. Right. I mean, hearing Anthony's story, and there are so many stories out there. It's painful. It's so I'm sitting here all emotional, listening to you guys, and I'm like, no, this is not right. It's not right.
I wish we could give everyone like a, fast forward, Back to the Future or whatever, fast forward 18 years, or wherever you're at. And, when you guys separate and, for them to see, like, had we done this or we do this and what happens, right? And even if you started out and you weren't co-parenting and then you eventually started and you fixed it, well, great. What if you started out even co-parenting and you started out 50-50 and you started out, where would you be? Versus what about some of those parents and, where the father wasn't there and the kid went and did terrible things, or, they grew up with all these, all these issues that they had because they didn't have, both parents in their life, and specifically not a father. If you could just fast forward and see what it would be like and choose the better option, right? And I'm glad that, like what you said, this listener the other day, like, she made a good choice. She made a good choice. She made a choice to say, you know what, I'm going to put aside all of the hurt, the pain, I'm right, he's wrong, whatever it is. And it's about my child. And I want that my child to have that the best stability and the best access to that father. And I mean, it's going to be great to see, the what happened because of her decision somewhere down the road, where we can hear how great the child's doing and how great the co-parenting is and all that, because she made that choice. So that's awesome.
I love to have. I'm working on bringing this woman on the show. To share this story herself. I think it's amazing.
If it can happen for her, imagine how many other mothers could have that same aha moment.
Yes.
Yes.
Any final thoughts from you, Shauna, before we bring the show to an end?
No, I just want to make an appeal to any alienating parents out there to think beyond your own pain and look through your child's eyes and look further down the road as well at what you're setting them up for, because you are just setting them up for failure. You've taken away half of who we are, and we need to know who we are.
Okay, Mark, final thoughts?
I just echo what was shared tonight, is that I think we all know that, by us trying to keep one parent from the other, in most situations, it's never a good thing, and it's always going to have devastating effects. So why are we doing it? Why are we allowing the courts or attorneys or friends that don't mean well or whoever to try and convince us to do that? It's not the right thing. It comes down
to a moral choice.
Yeah. Make the right choice. Everyone make the right choice. Just like this woman did the other day. Make the right choice. I know there's more of you out there, and I love seeing, like I said, the support we get from women, that fathers are important, and just, encourage that. Do some support on that side, like for fathers. If we know that that's the issue in today's society, and we know that that's where all the statistics and the devastating things happen because fathers aren't in their kids' lives, then let's change it now. Change it today.
Thank you, Shauna. We would love to have you back again.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, but my final thoughts, I strongly believe that parental alienation is child abuse. There's nothing else to describe it other than being an abuse to a child. And other people are doing, I believe that, some parents out there can put an end to parental alienation. Do what is right. Do what is morally right. Put yourself in the shoe of that child, of you growing up, right? Was your father taken out of your life? And if yes, how did you feel? The same way a child will be going through that pain. Just put yourself in the shoes of that child, right? It is wrong. It is morally wrong. It's ungodly to put another parent through so much pain. It's not just about you hurting the parent. You're also hurting the child. And who suffers more? the child suffers more. The child pays the price. And so we'll keep on this topic. If you're out there watching us tonight and you would want to participate and share your story, by all means, reach out to Mark or myself. We'd love to have you on the show because these stories need to be heard. And the more we talk about these things, the more we heal, right? The more we heal. For me, and for Mark and many other people, it's a healing process. And being able to share our stories, brings about some level of healing that goes a long way to help all of us and our children. Thank you, both of you. God bless you so much. And Shona, like I said, I would love to have you back. I know Donna is on as well. I'll have you and Donna back on the show. I just love what you shared tonight. God bless you both. Please, I'm gonna play the outro and I'll come back to you both.